More often than not, people will find themselves consuming media in an attempt to acquire a specific emotional response. If we're feeling down or upset about something, then we might turn to works that can make us laugh and feel better about ourselves, while others might seek stories whose sole purpose is to place them in an overall state of vulnerability. However, of all the different emotions that we actively look for when examining works of art, I highly doubt that guilt can be considered one of them, and it really shouldn't be any mystery as to why. After all, nobody wants to purposely feel guilty about consuming something, as it implies that one should feel ashamed and think of themselves as inferior to those who might do otherwise. Within every culture, I've noticed there always seems to exist this competitive hierarchy between different people's opinions, with the anime community of course being no different. If you hold a certain level of status, then naturally your opinions will be held with high regard, but because of this, sometimes it almost feels as if people only like or dislike certain shows based on some kind of imaginary consensus, rather than personal justification. If you support something popular or artistically creative, then there should be no problem because, after all, reviewers and critics should have a quote, refined sense of taste while also keeping the general audience in mind. But in the event someone were to consume something and hold it with a higher appreciation than what could be considered normal by the standards of the general populace, then that person's sense of taste and therefore their credibility starts to get called into question. Therefore, when the chips are down and these opinions are made public, there does exist a secret weapon that allows people to pretend that their liking a specific piece of media does not reflect on their tastes at all. This is where the phrase guilty pleasure comes into play, and for those who have lasted this long in the video, let me just say that this term is on a short list of buzzwords that I personally cannot stand as a self-proclaimed analyst. For the purpose of sounding pretentious and condescending, whether they intend it or not, once someone labels something with a guilty connotation, then to me that means the person is conforming to an already preconceived guideline with regards to how the show in question, quote, should be accepted. I'm not saying this reaction is 100% common, and it's not like everyone only appreciates what the majority deems as masterpieces, while simultaneously insulting other works. It's just that sometimes peer pressure makes us often behave as if we're expected to, and some people impose this illusion like it's their fucking birthright. Then, on the other side of the spectrum, there exist people who are against acknowledging certain shows as good because they don't fall in line with specific pre-established guidelines. And in the event they end up liking shows that are anything less than what they consider to be high art, then naturally they'll look for a way to make sure that the show, quote, doesn't count. At the end of the day, some people just can't live with the idea that they like certain shows without being ironic or defensive about it. And if you ask me, this seems like a rather limiting mindset to have regardless of where you're coming from. Now don't get me wrong, I can understand people not wanting to invest in something with less than excellent values, but the sad thing is that every now and then I end up coming across people who seem to forget that the relative quality of these so-called guidelines is based on a rather subjective and inauthentic foundation. In terms of artistic and literary merit, there really exists no objective hierarchy among works within any culture, because no matter how much you attempt to quantify something, personal bias will always end up seeping through. With that said, allow me to be perfectly clear. As someone who plans to go into the legal field when he gets older, I'm not saying the prospect of guilt shouldn't exist at all. However, I do posit that by definition, guilt is an emotion that falls in line with the idea of moral or ethical wrongness, often revolving around a person's relationship to others. If you lie, cheat, hurt someone else, or damage their property, then feeling guilty would be perfectly understandable. But feeling ashamed because you like or enjoy a specific show, comparatively, doesn't that just sound silly and counterintuitive? Heck, I'm sure there are bound to be people who would question my tastes after finding out I'm still up to date with the newest seasons of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc V, but considering the fact that art has the ability to connect with those who appreciate it on an individual level, should I allow outside feelings to influence that which has and always will primarily be a completely personal experience? Or did I just answer my own question? Who knows, maybe this can all be seen as some sad attempt at self-assurance, since admittedly I am operating under the premise that enjoying art is more important than being able to define or categorize it. But personally, I think feeling bound by any of these negative emotions would just go against why I'm a fan of the medium in the first place. When I find a work of art that appeals to me, even if that appeal might counter pre-existing tastes and expectations, I take that as a sign of growth on my part, which is something that I think every fan or critic should primarily strive for. After all, when you arrive at a point where you realize that you have your own reasons for liking something different and it doesn't necessarily matter whether those reasons are common or unique, then you can see the concept of guilty pleasures for exactly what they are. Flimsy, baseless excuses that do nothing but hold a person back. And if there ever comes a time where people are confident enough in their own taste to abandon this idea altogether, then let me just say you won't be hearing a single complaint coming from me.
Here we go.